Hey friends, welcome to a new episode. Today, we will talk about the road to September 11th. What if I told you that 9/11 was one of the biggest cover-ups in history? While some details of this tragedy are seared into our memories, there are many untold stories and unknown heroes from that day. We will be looking at how 9/11 changed our world forever, including never-before-seen footage. Hi, everyone. I'm your host. Some events in history are so monumental that they have an undeniable impact on the world we live in today. September 11, 2001. It has been 24 years since the Twin Towers were destroyed, and yet the events of that day continue to shape our lives. From the political tensions of the early 21st century to the omnipresence of airport security, everything we know about traveling post 9/11 is the result of what happened on that fateful Tuesday. And yet, despite how much we've changed, there are still so many questions without answers. Join me today as we uncover the truth behind the attack on the World Trade Center and learn how September 11th reshaped the modern world. Let us begin. In the weeks following 9/11, America was in shock. Many people couldn't understand why the U.S. had been attacked and by whom. At first, suspicion fell on Saudi Arabia. After all, 15 of the 19 hijackers were Saudi nationals. But it quickly became clear that the mastermind behind the attack was one man, Osama bin Laden. Bin Laden was the leader of the terrorist group Al-Qaeda, and he took responsibility for the attacks shortly after they occurred. He claimed that the attacks were in retaliation for the presence of U.S. troops in Saudi Arabia, as well as America's support for Israel. Although bin Laden was not present during the attacks, he did plan them out with his network of loyal followers. But something else was at play here as well. You see, bin Laden was convinced that the United States was determined to destroy him. This belief led to the death of many innocent people. And it wasn't the only time he would do this. In 2000, bin Laden had already plotted to bring down the stock market and destroy the New York Stock Exchange. However, this plot was leaked to the FBI and prevented from happening. So, he made a list of backup plans. One of these plans involved the use of two planes to ram into the World Trade Center. And while bin Laden didn't know it at the time, this would become the deadliest attack in human history. But another question on everyone's mind was, how could someone like bin Laden get away with this? Well, as it turns out, he wasn't working alone. Behind the scenes, bin Laden had the help of someone very close to the White House, but no one knew it. On the morning of September 11, 2001, just 40 minutes before the first plane hit the Twin Towers, President George W. Bush was reading to a class of second graders when he was informed of the attacks. As the president, it was his duty to respond appropriately, and the nation's security was now in his hands. But who was advising him, and what kind of advice were they giving him? What we now know is that one of those voices belonged to Lewis, a mysterious energy executive who seemed to know more about the attacks than anyone else. When Lewis first spoke with Bush, he told the president that the attacks were carried out by a group called the Islamic Front for the Liberation of Palestine. But later that evening, Lewis called Bush again and said that he was wrong. Instead, the attacks were most likely the work of Osama bin Laden. Lewis had connections to both the oil industry and the intelligence community, and he used his influence to ensure that the United States would go to war in Afghanistan. According to a former colleague of Lewis, he was like a shadow advisor to President Bush. But who was Lewis really working for? Well, that's still a mystery. However, it seems likely that Lewis was acting in the best interests of the United States and wanted to prevent another terrorist attack on American soil. Perhaps he was trying to protect Bush from making a decision he would later regret. Or maybe Lewis simply wanted to ensure that justice was done and bin Laden was brought to justice. While the events of September 11th shook the world, there were also many acts of heroism that emerged during this tragic time. One such hero was Wells Crowther, a young man who saved the lives of many people on that day. Despite being just 24 years old, Chris was a true American hero. On the morning of September 11, 2001, Chris was working as an equities trader at Sandler O'Neill and Partners in the South Tower of the World Trade Center. When the North Tower was hit, he immediately rushed to help his colleagues evacuate. But when the second plane hit the South Tower, he knew there wasn't enough time to escape. So he put on his oxygen mask and began helping others to evacuate. He guided people through the smoke-filled stairwell, helping them to find their way out of the building. And when he realized that the stairwell was becoming too dangerous to use, he helped people to escape through the building's emergency exit. But Chris's heroism didn't stop there. When he realized that many people were still trapped inside the building, he put on a second oxygen mask and went back in to help them. Sadly, he never made it out alive. But thanks to Chris's actions, more than 18 people survived the attack. As we remember the victims of 9/11s, let us also take a moment to honor the heroes who emerged during this time of tragedy. Chris was one such hero whose bravery and selflessness saved the lives of many. His story is a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope and courage can prevail. You're probably curious about what life was like before 9/11s and how it differs from today. It's hard to believe, but before 9/11s, you could bring almost anything onto an airplane, including knives and even box cutters. Security measures were much less stringent, and passengers were free to move around the cabin and even chat with pilots. Of course, this led to several incidents of turbulence, but it was much more common for planes to be delayed due to weather conditions rather than security concerns. However, the events of 9/11s changed everything. In the aftermath of the attacks, new regulations were put in place that made flying much less convenient. For example, passengers were no longer allowed to bring any sharp objects on board, and they had to go through a metal detector before boarding the plane. Additionally, flights were often delayed due to security concerns, and passengers were sometimes even stopped at the gate and questioned by security personnel. Despite these inconveniences, most people understood the need for increased security measures in the wake of the attacks, and while flying has never been quite as carefree as it once was, it's important to remember the heroes who keep us safe when we travel. From the ashes of 9/11s rose a new era of American patriotism. People proudly displayed American flags, and the iconic image of the flag waving in the wind at Ground Zero became a symbol of resilience and hope in the face of tragedy. But this surge of patriotism wasn't limited to the United States. It was a global phenomenon. People around the world came together to mourn the victims of the attacks and to show solidarity with the United States. In the days following the attacks, people held vigils, donated blood, and offered their support in any way they could. Even children were affected by the tragedy, and many schools held moments of silence or had students create artwork to honor the victims. This outpouring of support was a testament to the human spirit and showed that even in the darkest of times, hope and compassion can prevail. It was a reminder that no matter where we are from or what our beliefs may be, we are all connected by our shared humanity, and that we have the power to make a difference in the world. It's been over 2 decades since the events of September 11, 2001, but the impact of that day is still felt around the world. The attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon resulted in the deaths of nearly 3,000 people and caused billions of dollars in damage. In the aftermath of the attacks, the United States launched the global war on terror, which has seen military action in countries such as Afghanistan and Iraq. But the effects of 9/11s are not just limited to the physical and economic costs of their attacks. The events of that day also had a profound impact on the way we live our lives. Despite the challenges and changes that have come in the wake of 9/11s, it is important to remember the lessons of that day and to honor the victims and heroes of the attacks. On this 21st anniversary, let us take a moment of silence to remember those who were lost and to reflect on the impact that 9/11s has had on our world. Thank you for joining me today as we uncovered the truth behind the attacks on the World Trade Center and explored the ways in which 9/11s has shaped our world. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more informative and entertaining content. Goodbye.